to Thinking Green. I'm Rana, and almost exactly a month ago, I went to an event at the Kitchen Gallery in downtown New London, and it was called Legislative Action 101, and it was about advocating for clean energy. And it was only about an hour long, and afterwards, I felt as though, wow, there's a whole lot more information out there that wasn't covered, and things that I even felt like I could use a reminder on. So I invited the presenters to come onto our show, and they graciously accepted. So my guests today are Martha Klein. She's the chair and communications chair for Sierra Club Connecticut chapter, and Melissa Everett, who is from Clean Water Action, Clean Water Fund, and is the energy program manager. So we are going to talk about clean energy today, and what
can't get enough of it.
No, we can't, and we can't get it. There's nothing too clean. So we're going to talk about what's happening in Connecticut and what viewers can do. So welcome.
Thank you, Rana.
When you gave your presentation in New London, and I think you've been giving them all around the state, it's been a collaborative effort among several organizations that advocate for the environment in this state. And maybe you two want to talk a little bit about your own organizations.
Sure, I'll start. So Sierra Club, a lot of people have heard of it because we're one of the oldest environmental organizations in the United States. Started in 1892 in California, and now there's chapters in every state in the U.S. and Canada, Puerto Rico, and so on. The overriding goal of the Sierra Club right now is to try to fight climate change. And so I'm a volunteer in the state chapter, and so those are the kinds of things that we're working on, as well as protecting open land, but mainly focusing on energy, climate, clean air and water issues. And the Sierra Club is also one of the largest environmental organizations in the United States. We have over 2 million members.
Wow. And I would think in Connecticut, being a coastal state, climate change could be a big deal here when we think about potential rising of seawater.
It is a big deal here. We're actually losing coast in Connecticut more rapidly than other coastal states, I think having to do with our location and exposure. And we had billion-dollar storms, Sandy, Irene, and the 2011 October storm. Clearly, Connecticut is suffering from climate change already. Yeah.
Plus the surprise of our drought last summer, which was
severe,
scary
Yes.
wake-up moment, especially if you garden.
Oh, yeah.
So Clean Water Action, Clean Water Fund are two arms of the same national organization. And we were formed in the 1970s. We were many of the people who brought you the Clean Water Act. And our national organization and 20 some odd state chapters have been working to defend that, to make it clearer, to make it less full of loopholes, and then to work upstream. You can't have clean water if you have dirty power plants. You can't have clean water if you have toxics going into the water and so forth. So our state program has been responsible for a lot of landmark legislation to remove toxics from consumer products. We've been involved in the original Global Warming Solutions Act for Connecticut, and have been working ever since to strengthen that and sort of go to the next generation.
Now, the fact that you are the energy person makes me think that you've gone a little bit beyond just water.
Well, yeah,
and
I'm the
looking
energy
at the
and
big
sustainability
picture.
person, and that means we tie it all together, which is great. People walk up to us and they say, "Do you do water?" And we say, "Well, yeah, we're working on it."
It's in our name.
We are doing everything from coaching citizen groups that are fighting local battles to working with the state water planning process to just bringing water up in, wherever it's not brought up. But, the working together thing, I think it's worth emphasizing, because what you guys got that your viewers could actually bring to lots of places is a roadshow of a couple of organizations working together more closely than we have historically, and part of a network of, I'm guessing, 12 to 15 when they all show up, statewide national organizations that coordinate closely on legislation, that coordinate closely on strategy, that get up every morning and check what's happening at the legislature with our coffee so that you all don't have to.
Now, do you find that it's a fairly recent phenomenon, the collaboration among all the different groups working towards the same goal? Because it seems like I'm seeing more and more of this, especially in the last 6 months.
So let's try to spin November 2016 as not a complete negative. And so even though certainly there's been collaborations going on in Connecticut, but not at the level it is now, we're working together more powerfully to have more influence and do more work than I think we have in the past. And that's what people expect. People are scared and angry. And they're looking to see nonprofits respond.
And I think in addition to scared and angry, everyone wants to see things happen. And small groups have a hard time
small
moving
groups
things
become
forward.
large
Bigger
pretty
and
fast.
bigger, yeah.
I mean, as we thought, let's bring our statewide sophistication and expertise out to the small towns of Connecticut and help them get a clue, har.
They're geniuses.
They're
geniuses.
We found all these indivisible groups. We've spoken to, really large rooms. And we're reminded of all the people who have been active citizens for years and years, who may have gotten a little complacent or sidelined, who are back to it. So it's an exciting time, and we have lots of work to do.
We do. So what's the current status of clean energy in Connecticut? And, well, I want to show just our first slide very briefly because this is sort of what the
you
title
are an
of
artist
the,
of the slide.
This show, Rebooting for Renewables, and ready, I hope, for 100% clean energy in Connecticut. So with
I
that
came up
in
with that
mind, Melissa,
phrase. It's like this is going to stick to me.
It's great.
So right now, Connecticut gets about 4% of our electricity from renewable energy.
that sounds really low.
Isn't that really low? There is a national analysis. If you haven't heard of the Solutions Project, there's a bunch of people out of Stanford that just said, suppose we really think about having renewable energy scale up, like really, what would it look like? What would be the mix? How much land would it take, or water? And so they ran scenarios for the world, the country, and the states. Connecticut can do it without like bulldozing over, our farms or without distorting the way natural resources are used. A lot of it would be, some of it would be offshore wind, and some of it would be medium to large scale solar. Those are the two biggest contributors. Offshore wind, a lot of work has been done in figuring out where to site it so that the bird migratory pathways aren't, disturbed and that kind of stuff. It's big, it's multi-year. Department of Interior under the last administration did great work. Solar, Connecticut has a lot of solar on rooftops, and that's wonderful. But rooftop solar will never be a large player because so many old homes just weren't situated right. So many
like
old
the one
roofs
I
are,
live in.
Right.
Yeah.
shaded buildings. You don't want to cut down your trees. So medium to large solar, large operated by utilities, all good. Medium, on a landfill, on an oversized parking lot, on a commercial rooftop. That's the stuff that can happen all over the place. It can have lots of ownership, lots of skin in the game, and that's where Connecticut has been stalled. Other states, more than a dozen of them, have programs to do what's called shared solar, which is co-op style. So all the people that don't want to cut down their trees can pool working with a developer and buy shares of a solar installation in Massachusetts or New York, but not in Connecticut, except for a very small pilot program that has been very gradual to get off of the ground. So that's the setting. That's sort of what's happening and needs to happen more. I'll say two more things, and then I'm going to kind of feed it to Martha. We have this good cop and bad cop thing on what's happening. Connecticut is positioned to really do it right in terms of scaling up clean energy where it works for communities, because we have a structure that other states envy, We have what are called local clean energy task forces and committees, and the bliss of my job is I get paid to nurture about 60 of them around the state. They figure out where to put it that won't cause NIMBY responses, that's appropriate for the community, how to finance it, how to build political support. And yet, this legislative session, we're about less than a month till the end of the session. We've had a bunch of interesting bills to help scale up renewable energy. They have one thing in common. Until the last few days, most of them have not seen the light of day getting through committee. And in part because attention of legislators has been kind of sucked up by some of the bad stuff, the budget. So by the budget and by, the kind of, how would you say, the attitudinal framework that we aren't really ready and that we still have to think about.
Well, it's the voice of industry. I mean, they hear from industry much more powerfully and more frequently than what they hear from us, and industry says, we just don't think we're quite ready, whereas the evidence suggests that we're more ready than that.
Yeah.
And I wonder, when I think back into the 70s when solar was started to be thought of, and nuclear was also quite new, I always kind of felt as though the industry liked nuclear power better because it's bigger and you have more opportunities for profit because it's a very centralized way to produce. Solar, even the big solar and the big wind operations are not as centralized.
They're distributed, they're intermittent. There's a lot of nuance to making them work. And, nuclear power has been a source of electricity stability for the state. Right. It has employed a workforce, and like natural gas, these have been in various ways transitional, sources, and they don't go away easily. And you can't just say thank you, bye, you're done. You have to work out the phasing in of the next stuff.
Yeah, and this part of Connecticut in particular, it's a very touchy subject because Millstone is a huge employer. So, and
I think about, every time I see Donald Trump, doing the Trump digs coal thing, I look back to where my grandparents lived in coal country and, how destroyed the land is around, Grandma's house is right next to a coal mine sinkhole. And I think we don't need so much to preserve the jobs from the last gen industries as to evolve the jobs. I want to see everybody in the coal industry learn to install geothermal, learn to restore mountaintops that have been removed. I want to see the nuclear industry expertise evolve into the next high-tech stuff that we need.
Sure.
And the point should be made that there are, in fact, vastly more jobs in the renewable field than there are in fossil fuels.
And to some extent, I'm sure they're safer jobs than the last generation or the generation before in terms of the health and well-being of the workers.
Absolutely. The long-term exposure in the fossil fuel field is terrible, and people get sick.
Yeah. So, on the one hand, we're pushing. We're trying to keep our eyes on the prize of a legislative strategy that will get more attention for, a series of bills. I'm going to sketch out really briefly.
Sure.
And then we're also trying to not let us get distracted by a series of bad ideas that are still with us. So there have been a couple of bills to help municipalities afford renewable energy, something called the virtual net metering cap. And I'm not going to go into a lot of jargon here. A financing mechanism called zero emission renewable energy credits. A financing program for home renewables called RPACE. A bill to push the state to conserve more energy in its own buildings. And all of these were introduced, didn't really make it through committee. Still could be pulled in, and the ZREC one apparently was pulled in, to be part of a bill that just came out of committee today that had the ZREC was a side dish to the main course of a bill to make it more, so.
The Millstone bill.
The Millstone
Which
bill.
Martha will
which,
share.
We'll
Yes,
talk
I'm talking
about
too much.
briefly. We will try not to go into that sinkhole, but we will.
Well, yeah. It's a mechanism to make it to allow Millstone to bid into another source of financing, another market that had been reserved for renewable energy. Doesn't guarantee approving their proposals, but allows them to do that.
But you said there's a little bit of good, even though
There's
there's
good
attached to
so,
that.
Yeah, and
so they did sweeten the deal a little.
Our committee leadership, I think, really deliberated thoughtfully on how to handle these things, and so some financing mechanisms got in there, and then a commitment to increased purchase of renewable energy.
So it's a compromise, certainly.
Yeah. And I know I had seen a lot of information in opposition to the Millstone bill, but even our regional representatives and senators were very mixed on it.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's a good sign that people are mixed. That there's been, if you're watching, eventually we will say, do this, sign here,
yes,
et cetera. But I think we want to just make it clear that it's not a season of simple solutions.
That's also a change since November. We find that we're working much more collegially and cooperatively with people that before we were more at loggerheads with. So it's all it's brought us together in a certain sense.
Well, and if it deepens the whole conversation about the issues beyond just the superficial, in the long run, that's got to be good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you're the bad news person.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about one of the things that's kind of preventing us from getting to taking advantage of the good things that Melissa was talking about. Is the current energy strategy for Connecticut. So the current energy strategy for Connecticut, based on the first comprehensive energy strategy from 2013, was designed to increase the use of natural gas by a lot in Connecticut. And the Sierra Club is opposed to that plan for a couple of reasons. So it turns out that natural gas is actually methane, 97% methane. So essentially it's methane. Methane is a terrible global greenhouse gas. In other words, it's worse than carbon dioxide at causing global heating. And the reason for using natural gas, one of the reasons was, well, it will produce less carbon dioxide when we burn it, but in fact the methane that leaks quite a lot is responsible for causing even worse global heating or climate change or climate disruption. So for many reasons, basically the leaking, the climate change, and then the economic, the fact that there's no price difference between gas and oil anymore, that collapsed due to fracking.
And that was sort of an artificial difference anyway, wasn't it?
So years ago, oil was more expensive. And when this plan was first beginning to be discussed, which was really back in 2011, it did look like there might be some financial benefits. There was an industry commission study called The Economic Impact in Connecticut of using more natural gas. And it looked like it would be improved, but that was before the price differential collapsed. So once the cost of gas went down to where the cost of oil had gone down to, and they were more or less equivalent, which is roughly where they are today, there is not a benefit economically in spending thousands of dollars to convert many residences or businesses to the use of natural gas or methane from oil. There is no economic benefit, and if there isn't an economic benefit or a climate benefit, then there isn't really a benefit. And furthermore, it has to be stated that this plan, at least within Connecticut, is ratepayer subsidized. So ratepayers are contributing to these massive conversions to natural gas, fabricating a need for more methane within the state. And so in addition to all these new customers for methane that our state has been trying to convert from the in-state plan, there is also interstate pipelines that are coming from, Pennsylvania, from New York actually, but coming from the fracking fields to the west of that. We have two different interstate pipelines, regional pipelines, that are about to start construction right now. We already had one that's complete, the AIM, and now Atlantic Bridge and Kinder Morgan's Connecticut expansion are about to begin bringing more methane into the state. One way to find a way to use all this methane that Connecticut does not currently need is to build 4 new gas powered plants. They're under construction, or they're undergoing approval or construction right now. And just to put that into comparison with the good side of what's happening in Connecticut, last year, Connecticut, the Department of Energy, DEEP, procured about 170, almost 200 megawatts of new clean energy. That is to say, truly clean energy efficiencies and 100% renewable power powered by solar or wind. 170 megawatts, that was 2016. Right now, our state is about to bring a little over 2,000 megawatts, 170 of clean, 2,000 megawatts of methane-powered energy from these 4 different power plants that are coming online. That doesn't even include the amount of gas that's getting piped through the pipelines and going to other parts of New England or eventually to Canada. So overall, the methane expansion plan for the state is using up ratepayer funds, and a lot of this state investment has really gone into that. And when you look at fuel use in Connecticut, I think that was one of the graphs that you picked up, it shows that we use more natural gas to power our state than anything else. The second thing is nuclear power, and then you go way, way, way down, and here's renewable energy. So to get to this place where Melissa's talking about, where the eyes are on the prize and we're shifting to this better thing, we cannot continue to invest in the methane expansion, just as I would argue we probably can't keep investing at the same level in nuclear. What we need to do, and I'm not saying shut down the switch today, because we're not prepared to do that. But what we have to do is begin to take some of these investments, these millions of ratepayer dollars that they've already been spending, which have benefited at this point Eversource and UI, and shift it into investment into some of these other things, which are going to have to include, larger scale solar, distributed energy, people being able to buy into things, and so on and so forth, community solar. So we have to move into that direction, and that means minimizing the methane expansion.
Do you think people have really bought into the idea of methane as the bridge fuel? Because I'm on the Planning and Zoning Commission in New London, and we're working on our 10-year plan of conservation and development. And there is a sentence in there that says, in the draft, that says, our goal is to expand our natural gas infrastructure. And I raised my hand and said, we certainly want to maintain it. We don't want leaks. We want it to be in good condition. But if we're looking at a plan for 10 years down the road, shouldn't our goal be more renewables and not more natural gas?
What was the answer?
Yeah, that's exactly
So now we have like a compound sentence that said we will expand our natural gas infrastructure while exploring renewables.
How close to the deadline are you on this plan?
Not very.
Good, okay.
Well, we're coming back to this.
We need Melissa on this one.
We're coming back to this.
Yeah, just to say, several Connecticut communities have begun integrating renewable energy specifically into those plans of conservation and development. And in some cases, expressing a long-term commitment to 100% renewables. Westport is a model of that. Simsbury and West Hartford have a couple of, I love these guys, just like retired actuaries who are crunching numbers and figuring out for every town, how do you go into your, how do you find your residential numbers, your commercial numbers, how do you estimate your vehicle emissions, and really make a long-range plan to neutralize all that, or to power it renewably or with storage. So it's electrifying the vehicles, it's radical energy efficiency.
Putting solar farms onto landfills, and also your town dumps, and a lot of towns have done that or are talking about doing that.
And a lot of
over parking lots makes a lot of sense.
Tremendous.
Keep the snow off the lots at the same time you're generating.
And even it's a lot of capital, but we have to start to think about putting them over the water reservoirs. Because we're having serious evaporation from drought.
Yeah. So what I find, literally, if you're thinking about this, We have
Yes.
a working group of task forces that are brainstorming about how do we help our fellow towns do our plans of
You
conservation
will be
and
hearing
development.
from me
Right.
because it is coming back.
Yeah.
We're doing the first
Yeah.
draft, but the very first draft that came to us said zero about renewables, and getting half a sentence was a baby step. But afterwards, I thought, oh, this is looking 10 years down the road
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
seeing natural gas and methane as our goal was depressing to me.
Yeah,
I
it
think-
may be a means to an end or a compromise you want to include in a list of things, but
Right.
really there is so much imagination moving through our communities these days, and so many elected officials are getting so many yayas out of, cutting the ribbon on the solar installation. I mean, it really is coming into its own.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Just make it the to-do thing.
On the negative side, I'm just going to say that
Okay.
someone did ask Governor Malloy about this very, very recently at an event and said, are you still believing that this is a bridge? And he definitely talked good things about renewable energy, and we're very lucky to have a governor that gets it about climate change. Not everybody has that. But he absolutely thought that it's a bridge, and that when someone said in the audience, but what about methane emissions? And what about climate disruption? And he said, that is not true. So there are absolutely people, particularly in industry, but also in government to some extent, although there has been a big change,
Right.
who are still saying, no, it is a bridge. If it's a bridge, we're at the end of the bridge and we're perilously hanging over the cliff, if you want to use that metaphor. It's not a bridge. One fossil fuel that destroys the climate isn't better than a different fossil fuel.
Right.
We quite simply need to leave it in the ground and stop burning fossil fuels.
And to do that, we need to make transition plans
We do.
that are much more concrete. And I was able to I was part of a almost standing room only gathering in January, hosted by our State Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, that built off some media coverage about, so where are we going to put these things? And some conversations among our energy task forces about where are we going to put these things, landfills, all the stuff we've been talking about. And so a discussion has begun about actually getting layers of maps about where all these, junk lands, underutilized lands are, and figuring out policy incentive for scaled up renewable energy development on those. And that's a year or two of a bunch of geeks at the computer, but then it's a real door opening. And so that's where we're kind of in the middle of that kind of awakening.
I'm guessing that over the past many years, because I don't think people have been as riled up over the last 10 years as they have been the last few months, that it's mostly been the industry whispering in the ears of the legislators. And now it seems as though everyone else has gotten noisier. Not that the Sierra Club wasn't there before and other groups, but it's just been taken up a notch.
It's absolutely true. So, all the different nonprofits are experiencing this, that people are coming out and saying, hey, we want to help, we want to get involved too, but we don't quite know what to do. What the Sierra Club is really good at, and so are other organizations, but we've been doing it for a really long time, is harnessing the strength of our grassroots numbers, because we have a large membership and large number of supporters, and encouraging people, training people to do lobbying, which is really just citizen advocacy for the things that we want. And so we've been doing this a lot this year, and these are the presentations and the briefings that Melissa and I have been doing, and also with the Connecticut Fund for the Environment, talking to people about what is lobbying and basically what citizen advocacy involves. It involves talking, calling, or writing your state senator and state representative. This can also happen on the federal level, but all the stuff that we talked about today these are state-based laws. So
Right.
when you communicate with your politician, you're talking with your state senator, state representative. You educate yourself so you know what you're talking about when you talk to them. You call or write or go and make an appointment to meet with them. You meet with maybe an aide. You may very often be able to meet with the legislator themselves. And what you want to do is be respectful, thoughtful, concise. People don't have a lot of time, and get your message across. Go in there with one, at most two bills or issues, that you're advocating for. Never go in with a laundry list to a politician and say, these are all the things I'd like you to vote on. And probably really deeply, there's really just a couple things that you truly need to advocate for. In my case, it's really clean energy. It's stopping the onslaught of fossil fuels and building up the development of all this other stuff. So we call this legislative advocacy 101, and then you can, at a higher level, there's 202, and we've been giving trainings, and there's some materials on the website, to learn about that. It's really pretty simple and basic, but it's something, you made that point. They've been hearing from industry, and industry hasn't been whispering. Let's face it, industry's been talking very, very loud, but we haven't been talking. We haven't been going there. Even I have been politically active. I'm a firebrand from way back. And I have not done this work of actually going and talking to my politician until now. I was always ready to have the rally and have the fight and have the protest, but really until about the last year.
It's interesting. And we have been going, but having these polite meetings and having, thank you for sharing, and just realizing that you need much more of an outside game than any single organization has had. I mean, 10 years ago or so, our organization was involved in shutting down a bunch of very bad power plants called the Sooty Six. And it was a very feisty time, and we did a lot of creative outreach. And then we kind of got into more of a service model, more of working to develop community capacity. We're just now bringing it back to say, all right, you want more clean energy in your community? You got to lobby for the financing mechanisms and the policy supports to make that work. And we're finding towns are really ready. And wherever you are listening to this, not only should you be contacting your legislator, you should be encouraging your councils and boards and so forth to be writing on behalf of the community. And you should be taking the same talking points that you're using for your lobbying and plop them into a little 300-word letter to the editor and pop it off every morning with your coffee because
the time is now.
It is. And, it's sort of interesting. You said you spent some years mostly building capacity. Well, this is what you were building capacity for.
You think?
Yeah. And you
it's
might not have really known it at the time,
Right.
but this is what you were building capacity for.
Yeah, and that isn't a vague concept. When we go out into a community where there's been a clean energy task force that's done outreach to help people save money and energy, to help people become literate on the subject, when there are local appointed people who are like us, who are respected and trusted, it's way easier to get folks ready to express their views intelligently.
So we need a much more educated group of and it's mostly volunteer efforts.
Oh gosh, yes.
And it is difficult for volunteers to come up and have an equal footing with lobbyists who are definitely not volunteers. But there are a lot more of us.
And when you start sitting down with the volunteers, I had coffee with a volunteer yesterday morning who was one of my retired actuaries I was talking about,
Right.
who is, developing the analytic methods for towns to start mapping out their process toward 100% renewable energy. And he's not getting paid, so he's a volunteer. But you start looking at the skill levels and the sophistication of our volunteers. And I don't just mean elite people. I just mean people who've been thinking and caring for a long time. We have to give ourselves credit.
And, before we totally leave the subject of methane, because methane in Connecticut is an issue, and I think we have to convince people that it's kind of a bridge to nowhere.
That's exactly correct. So the Sierra Club is definitely doing that. So we have been doing, we did a lobby day. So for people that aren't necessarily as sophisticated about energy and feel like they have more to learn, we're doing stuff like that. We did one big clean energy lobby day in March, but we're doing little more frequent things. If people are interested, get in touch with us. We're taking small numbers of people up to Hartford, to the legislative office building, talking to your particular state senator, state representative about, clean energy are one or two of the bills that we advocate for. And in the process, educating people about how this is done, giving people a chance to speak to the legislator, feel comfortable about it, feel less shy or unsafe, or like you're going to say the wrong thing, because they're all just people too anyway. And so it's a great experience for people. I think we wind up actually having fun with it, believe it or not. And so if anybody is interested in getting involved with citizen lobbying, get in touch with Sierra Club. This is also building, and Melissa's always often reminding us of that, eyes to the prize. We are not going to achieve everything we want in this legislative session, but this is also going towards next year and the year after. It's a long-range plan. We will be transitioning to clean energy over time, hopefully quickly, and we will be transitioning off of fossil fuel over time, but hopefully quickly.
And I did have a couple of graphs just for people who like looking at the numbers. This is a comparison of greenhouse gas footprint of shale gas, conventional gas, coal, oil, and natural gas has quite a bit of emission.
That's right. So the clean, green natural gas is a marketing campaign. The fact that they even called methane natural gas was a brilliant marketing technique. It's really quite dirty and unsafe. That you could argue that if every single leak in the entire system were sealed, methane might be okay. That argument is debatable. First of all, people who work in pipeline science say that you can never seal things 100%. But the other thing is that due to fracking now, there are trace carcinogens and radioactivity in in the methane itself, as well as in the waste products. But there are even traces of them in the methane itself that people are breathing and their children breathe in their own home. So there's reasons to be really concerned about it not being clean and green, even above and beyond the fact that it is a climate disruptor. And the leak thing, I just had to jump back to something I forgot to say. The greatest leaking is happening from the wells, from the fracking fields. And we've known that for a while. But what we've learned much more recently is that up to 5% of all the methane is just going into the air. But what we've learned more recently is that the pipelines also leak all the way along the line at a much higher rate than industry has told us. The Connecticut Sierra Club did our own study in Hartford of Hartford pipelines, and we found that they're leaking at about 5 times the rate of what PURA has recorded from industry. Also, it leaks at power plants at a much higher rate than what was previously known, and also from compressor stations and all other natural gas infrastructure. So the leaking is another thing that people didn't know about originally that we now know about better, and that has changed the whole picture.
So, and this comparison of the greenhouse gas footprint, again, it's not really a big improvement.
Not a big improvement.
In fact, it's worse than, in some ways. I'm not saying we should go back to coal, but in terms of greenhouse gas footprint, it's a solution that brings a whole slew of its own new problems.
That's right.
And this,
That's from the Hartford gas leak study. So the top line is showing you the data from PURA, which estimates those numbers on the left are literally the numbers of leaks they claimed, 7, 5, 4, and this is over about a 2-year period. Our data from the Connecticut Sierra Club Hartford gas leak study that was done objectively. By the way, we took a spectrometer and drove 210 miles of Hartford city streets. That's not what the industry does. And our leaks, you see 21 on the left-hand column, 15.8. We found a rate of leakage approximately 5 times the numbers of leaks. I can't tell you the exact amount of methane. Our study was not that sophisticated. We found 5 times the number of leaks as what Connecticut Natural Gas, owned by Iberdrola, had reported to PURA. PURA has all of its records. PURA keeps everything, the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority. And they believe that their records are totally comprehensive, but their records are developed from what CNG reports to them. And CNG knows about leaks because someone calls them on the phone and says, I smell rotten eggs, I smell mercaptan, which is a dangerous substance, and I think there's a leak. That's how they know about it. They're not going out there and monitoring for leaks. So this is a hugely important piece of data, because this is the very first time that one of these studies has been done in the state of Connecticut. They've done them in Mass, they've done them in New York, they've done them in California, but we haven't done them here. We never previously could say objectively that we are leaking much more gas from our pipelines than what industry tells us. We know now that we are.
Wow. So yes, and the take-home message, Connecticut lags.
Yeah.
Well, I have a couple other take-home messages. One,
Okay.
citizen science rocks.
Yeah.
Because you know, the internet is kind of the great equalizer, and I don't mean to suggest that you can just kind of muddle your way into this stuff, but there's been a tremendous amount of research on land use, resource management, all this stuff, done by trained lay people with professional and academic guidance and review. And that gives a lot of power to the citizen. The other thing I would just point us to is Connecticut is soon to release the next 3-year comprehensive energy strategy. We didn't used to do them, and we are watching and hoping that it will not only be a menu of energy sources, but that it will be a pathway of how much renewables by when, where they're going to go, how we're going to handle siting policy, how we're going to handle consumer protection, because solar, no matter how wonderful it is, can have its own scams.
Sure.
How we're going to handle valuing for all the ways that solar and other renewables contribute to the grid and impact the grid. How we're going to upgrade the grid. And I just actually was speaking with an engineer from Eversource at an event, and he said they are working on a grid modernization plan, which is a great thing to know. So, you know, if we start looking at how to move these things forward, and instead of having these kind of legislative volleys coming from the different groups and the different agencies and stuff in the crazy way that it is now, and instead try to get everybody to the same table, which I hope we will be able to do in bringing feedback to the comprehensive energy strategy, and really say, here's where we got to make it happen right, and negotiate it to some kind of an actionable level.
Well, and this is the slide we definitely wanted everyone to see. Ready for
Isn't it handy?
100% clean energy.
Yay.
So how are we ready, and how can we become more ready?
So the things I just mentioned about getting a very short list of policies into place, I think, and getting the utilities, the environmental advocates, the consumer advocates, the regulatory agencies to be speaking the same language and agreeing on what they are. I think that's the first step. To do that first step, there's a kind of a minus zeroth step, if you will, or
the step before the
step
first
before
step.
the step. And I really think that's what we are taking now. And it is about pulling our energy back from the things that confuse and delay us. Whether it is, you know, spending a big chunk of the legislative session worrying about Millstone rather than strategizing about clean energy, which we all fell into it.
Right.
Well, there are a ton of bills.
Yeah,
I looked at the list, and it's like 2.5 pages.
Right. But
So,
I mean, so getting
much potential for distraction.
getting our attention focused on a short list of the good ones, which I think we have, and getting our sense of possibility back. You know, really saying, yes, we are going to make this transition. These new technologies, solar, it's wind, it's geothermal, it's hydro, it's
And
all that,
batteries and
it's
storage
all that stuff. These are not little boutique-y things that are going to stay marginal. These are actually going to be mainstreamed in the pretty near future, and we better be able to imagine it.
It's exactly true, because the politicians are even talking about it. Everyone that we talk to says, yes, clean renewable energy, we need to get there. They don't know how we're going to get there. That's the thing, we need the plan to get there. Everybody is now agreeing we need to get there.
Yeah.
We just don't know how to get there.
So everybody who's listening, if you're into this stuff, find one of us. Find Clean Water Fund, Clean Water Action, find Sierra Club.
350 Connecticut, CFE.
Yeah, any of those folks. But find us, stick to us, tolerate the email traffic, digest it, ask questions, bring your friends together to do stuff, and get ready. And I think in the next few weeks, if we know how to find you, we will be sending you action alerts, and we will be inviting you to Hartford. We will be inviting you to contact your legislator and really, push for a finish that gets us a really good bill or two.
Now, I want to spend time, we have 5 or 6 minutes left, so that you can talk a little bit about your own organizations and try to not just have people sign up for action alerts, but your 501c3s and 501c4s. How can people get involved? How can people be supportive? What major issues are you working on? So I don't know which of you wants to start.
Well, I mean, it's Sierra, because I'm connected to Sierra Club. Sierra Club, being one of the oldest and largest environmental organizations in the United States, has a bigger infrastructure to tap into. So although I really want people to pay attention to what's happening in Connecticut, I'm terribly focused on the local. So the Sierra Club National has an online petition site called Add Up. Everybody's doing these days, sign up for petitions. But we recently just started our first Connecticut-based Add Up petition campaign, which is a campaign, Stop the Kinder Morgan and Enbridge or Spectra pipelines. So those are the interstate pipelines I was talking about. They're like this big, bring in a lot of gas that we're not even going to use and that we don't really need. So that's a petition site. Everybody can go to addup.org is what I think it is, or look it up on Sierra Club. And if they ask where you are, you're in Connecticut, and this will come to you. And this campaign to stop the interstate pipelines, click on it, and you'll wind up sending a letter to both Senator Blumenthal, Murphy, and then your federal congressperson, wherever you happen to live. I think we're in Courtney. No, we're not in Courtney. We're in Courtney.
The whole of Eastern Connecticut is Courtney.
We are in Courtney.
From Enfield to through Madison almost.
Right. I know he's got a funny.
He's got a huge land mass. I don't know if he has a huge population, but the land mass is
because you guys are sparsely populated out here. And but so he has definitely gotten this petition. I know he has, because I know some of your friends around here who've been sending it. So that's a big action. If you care about this methane expansion, this is one of the ways of stopping it. We need to let the federal politicians know as well as the state politicians. So that's the Add Up campaign. The other thing is, if you look at our state website, sierraclub.org/Connecticut. You can find me on there. By the way, you can find my number. Call me up. I love to get phone calls. I really prefer them to email. And I can plug you in, or you can talk to our office manager, to these citizen advocacy days that we're going to be doing between now, and we only have until June 7th, so we're not going to be doing a whole lot of them. And then we're going to take this up again next year. But this is the whole idea about setting the field, keeping the eyes on the prize, making sure the politicians are hearing our voices, which are saying we want clean energy and we want fossil fuels in the ground. And they always say, yes, we want that too. So now we have to figure out how to get there. So those are a couple of actions people can. I've got a sample letter on the website to Commissioner Klein, who's the head of DEEP, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, and that's actually a sample letter about the CES, the Comprehensive Energy Strategy, that's going to be coming out really soon. And it says, make a better comprehensive strategy that isn't designed to increase methane so much and take into account methane emissions and global heating potential of methane. Those are 3 actions right there.
And so just briefly, we have, in addition to the stuff I talked about, we've got national campaign staff that have a really pretty sophisticated and in the weeds of what's happening in all of the efforts to defund EPA, to bring, to bring the fossil fuel industry in to regulate itself. To
block the methane rollback.
If you go to cleanwater.org, you can sign up for action alerts. You can host a house party. You can host a briefing on water issues as well as energy issues. You can hear from us strategic analysis on what's going on with the Clean Water Rule, with EPA funding, with Department of Energy, all of that stuff. And you can read some really thoughtful blogs on our We All Live Upstream, because I think for every action you take, there needs to be an equal and opposite reaction called feeding yourself. And Sierra Club does it with hikes, which are the greatest thing in the world. And we do it with house meetings and gatherings and also with really high quality writing on our site. So hopefully those things will entice you all to check us out,
Club.org/Connecticut.
and cleanwater.org/Connecticut.
Now, in the last minute or so we decided we'd go out with some good news on some legislation that passed today that New Londoners in particular might be interested in.
So the Bill 6329, that's the fracking waste ban that everybody may have heard about, this passed today. It passed the Connecticut legislature today. This is a victory. This is a reason to celebrate. This is something that so many environmentalists have worked so hard to do. I know that New London passed the fracking waste ban,
11.
and that's something to be so proud of. And I don't know that towns should stop doing that. I believe the towns that are already working on that are going to continue. And the bill wasn't perfect. There was compromise, but it passed, and it's a thrill.
Fist bumps.
Yes, really, because when it came to the city council in New London, there was concern that if the state did not follow suit, then we weren't sure how meaningful it was. But it turns out that the momentum of the towns, I think, influenced the movement at the state level.
Absolutely. Local is so important, and the people rising up and speaking out is really making a change.
And I would say Eastern Connecticut, also to be thankful for, has some great energy task forces. Madison is one of the rock stars. I believe there's interest in New London in developing one.
Right.
So I hope that we get to work with you all some more because you're fun.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming on. I think we're on our last 5 seconds. So thank you so much, and we'll stay in touch. Come back to New London anytime. Next week, our guests will be from Fresh New London, and we'll be talking about food security. So we'll see you then. Thanks. Thank you,
Rana.
too.
Thank you.
Africa, Africa.